Hello, we are in Museum of Architecture and Design in Ljubljana, in MAO. MAO is the founder of Future Architecture Platform, and we coordinate the 27 members that you can meet in the other rooms. But at the same time, MAO is the museum, the National Museum of Architecture and Design. We hold collections. In our collections, you can find important buildings and consumer products. And these collections, for us, they are a bank of ideas. And at the same time, they are something that we can use to instigate discussions on contemporary pressing issues. And one of the very pressing topics today is the topic of resource use, resource efficiency. That's why we decided to invite to our Future Architecture Room Janez Potočnik. Janez Potočnik is co-chair of United Nations International Resource Panel since 2014. This is a panel of eminent scientists who study global resource use and give guidance regarding that. Janez Potočnik is an economist, but at the same time, he has extensive experience in the field of the environment. He served as European Commissioner in 2 terms, in his first term as Commissioner for Science and in his second term as Commissioner for the Environment. Today, he's also chairing the Forum for the Future of Agriculture, and since last year, he's chairing the forum Think Forest. Janez Potočnik obviously is a very busy man. That's why we decided to visit him at his home on the outskirts of Ljubljana. We are here in Šmartno on the outskirts of Ljubljana on the garden of Janez Potočnik. Janez, thank you for being part of Future Architecture Rooms.
It's a pleasure.
A week ago we reached World Overshoot Day. If we all lived the way we do in European Union, we would need 2.8 Earths. The population in Europe is aging, but the world population is growing. And the pressure on resources is incredible. What are the most critical indicators that everyone should understand right now?
Yeah, we have just last year in the International Resource Panel, which I'm co-chairing, it was established by UNEP, we released the Global Resource Outlook. And it's a first comprehensive overview of the resource developments in last 50 years, and also with some crucial estimates and indications which we need to take into account. What we found out is that in the last 50 years, the resource use has practically tripled, that per capita use has almost doubled, which means that majority of that tripling could be connected with economic development, the rest, of course, with population growth, and that material productivity, which is in a way a kind of efficiency of the use of natural resources, of materials, compared to the unit of GDP, which was growing till the year 2000. Actually, after the year 2000 started to decrease. In the last years, it's basically stable. What does that mean? It means that a lot of the production, which was previously done by resource-efficient countries like Europe, Japan, like United States, in the meantime shifted to the countries which are less resource-efficient, like Indonesia, like China, like India. So this global shift of production from resource-efficient to resource-less efficient countries, it's on a global level, actually showing that we are now using more resources per unit of GDP than actually we have before the year 2000. So it's quite a critical thing. We have also analyzed the environmental impacts, and we found out that 90% of globe, if we look only to extraction and processing phase, that 90% of land-related biodiversity loss and water stress can be related to the resource use. Mainly this is connected to the biomass. So in short, if I simplify, if you do not really change the policy related to food production, which is to a large extent related to to the biomass, to the land, and so on, you cannot solve that problem. We found out also that half of the climate change is related to extraction and processing of natural resources, and even 1/3 of pollution, which is in a way strange, because we did not took into account the consumption. But if I try to explain and translate, if you buy a car and you park it in front of your house, you don't use it at all, you have already caused 1/3 of the pollution with buying the car, because you need to extract resources and need to produce the car. So that are the things which we normally don't see when we are looking to the pollution which is connected to the mobility. And finally, one important thing is when we look to material footprint, so how much of the materials, if we connect it with the consumption story, actually can be related to to the countries which are developed, high-level development countries, comparing with the low development countries. We found out that high development countries are actually consuming 13 times more per capita than low developed countries, which means that if we are sincere and if we want really to address those issues, of course, the real question is connected with the countries which are living better, which are consuming more, which are basically, in a way, kept in consumerism logic and approach. And of course, we belong to those countries, and that's why the real concentration should be how we actually change the way we produce and consume in those countries.
And then there are other challenges, because the way the population grows, we predict that in 2050 we will live in cities, and half of these cities are not even built yet. This sounds scary, but at the same time, it sounds as a big opportunity. What are the challenges that we should look at developing new urban systems?
Indeed, and one of the things which we found out is also an interesting fact that in just one of the recent 3 years, China consumed more cement than actually United States of America during the whole 20th century. So I just want to say that the developments in those fast developing nations, it's going really quickly, and that this has to be taken into account. But there are two things which we need to distinguish. One is developed countries, where majority of those cities are actually already existing. So the real question there, which might be even more difficult than in the developing countries, is how to retrofit the already existing housing sector. And then on the other hand, you have the developing countries, where of course the question is different, because there you have a major movement from the urban, from the rural to the urban areas, and that's where the building of these new cities and new development is actually happening. What we would need to do there, it's simply that they do not repeat the mistakes which we have done in how we have created those cities. We know much more than we did now, than we did 50, 100 years ago. And I think it would be essential that whatever we do now, we take those things into account.
So what are the key factors that you at the International Resource Panel see right now as key factors for the healthy development of the human society in the future?
Yeah, one of the essential basic theories on which our logic in International Resource Panel it's built, it's so-called decoupling of resource use from economic growth. So we do not say we should not grow in the future anymore, but what we are saying is the growth should not be done in a way like it was in the past, when, for example, any growth was based on the same increase of consumption of natural resources, energy, and so on. So we should decouple those things, and it's possible. There are many solutions which are existing, and we should decouple this economic development and resource use also from environmental impacts. So this is the essential kind of theoretical logic on which we are building our knowledge. So we do believe that in this, when we talk about impacts and states like climate change consequences, like biodiversity loss, like pollution, like health implications, that we should always look to the drivers and pressures. And whenever you say drivers and pressures, you basically say humans. So humans, human activity, economics. And if I try to simplify you, of course, we are organized in a way that we live in market economies. And in market economies, what really matters are the signals which you are sending on the market to the market players. And if I simplify, the production financial capital is overvalued and over-rewarded, human capital is undervalued and under-rewarded, and natural capital, to a large extent, it's not valued and not rewarded at all. And if you are sending those signals to market players, don't believe that you will get out of that a kind of a balanced socio-economic, environmental situation. So I think it's essential that we understand that we need to go to the basis of economic structures which are actually running our lives. All of us are homo economicus. All of us want to live well, and we all want to live comfortable. So we don't call actually, no, you should live worse, but there are different ways how you can actually fulfill human needs, and that's actually our major message.
The things that you are mentioning right now talk about the need for changing the policy making as well. How should this change?
You know, lots of changes are actually already happening. I firmly believe that, for example, European Green Deal, which was adopted recently, it's a major step ahead. I can explain why. Because when I was a member of European Commission, it was still very much perceived, and it's still very much perceived by many also today, maybe not in European Commission, but elsewhere, that economic development is in contradiction with preservation of environment. While the European Green Deal is actually recognizing future economic development to a large extent depends on how we will preserve and how we will maintain and treat the environment. And I think that's a major shift in the approach. And also, if you look, for example, to the recent developments which are connected to COVID and health crisis. So I think it's really, really essential that we learn lessons from this period, because these lessons are brilliant and clear. Some are saying that that basically the situation and the challenges after the COVID will never be the same. I'm claiming just the opposite. It will be the same. The difference is only that we will only hopefully better understand that these challenges are among us, and that we have to seriously organize ourselves to deal with them. So if it's anything, what we conclude from this is that the frequency and severity, the likelihood of the events like it's the COVID-related health crisis or extreme weather events which are related to climate will in the future will increase. So we need to be more resilient, we need to be better prepared, and we need to build our societies and economies in a way that we are ready for those challenges. Because if we simply try to still put them under the carpet, I think it will not end up well. So in a way, we are depleting natural capital and we are indebting future generations. It's simply not fair. It's not reasonable, and it's not a future any of us would like.
You are also the man who launched circular economy, first as environmental initiative and then as economically based initiative. Architecture and urban design should play an important role in transforming economy into a more circular. What kind of role should architecture play in the circular economy?
Yeah. Listen, I do understand circular economy as a kind of quite holistically. So it's certainly not only about management of waste. You should see it as a kind of transition from the old economic model to a new economic model, which it's to a large extent mirroring how nature is actually behaving, because many of the things we can learn from the nature. And for me, there are some essential things which we need to take into account, like when we talk about the producer the link between the producer and the product is entirely lost today. So when this chair left the factory, the producer don't care anymore what will be happening with the chair. So, and the value which would need to be maintained in the materials which are inbuilt in that is actually lost. So if we would better connect producers with the products which they are producing, I think we could do, so this is so-called producer's ownership story. I think we could do a lot. On the other hand, when we look to the consumer, we actually you don't need a chair, you need to sit. You don't need a car, you need mobility. You don't need, I don't know, a refrigerator, you need healthy food and fresh food. So, and I can continue with that. So you basically need to look to the things through the human needs, and we were never claiming that one should live in a different way, but this ownership is to a large extent a serious problem. Because at least I know for my generation, if we didn't have our own house, if we didn't have a large car parked in front of our house, we were seen as unsuccessful. So this was in a way a goal. Even now for the young generation, the things are different. So they really want mobility. They want a place to stay. And in many cases, when it comes to the build sector, we can easily see that a lot of houses which are built today, in particularly in rural area, are empty and they are falling apart because of the ownership story and ownership structure. If I go finally to the role of architecture, so in any product, including in the products which you are delivering, everything starts with a design. If you design it wrongly, forget everything else, because there the story starts. So if the designer is not very much involved in the whole thinking and logic, how the building, how the product is actually, from what materials, how the things are then organized in the cities, in a knots, for example, which makes there certain logic, spatial planning, how the things, how you think about efficiency when it comes to materials, when it comes to the use of energy and so on. If these things are not well thought through, if the materials are used in a way that at the end you can't recycle them, which is the major problem today, that we have enormous amounts of materials which are not recycled in reality, linked to the housing sector, then we have the problem. So it starts with architects. So you have a responsibility which is extremely huge in that respect, and I think that's in a way how you should understand it. So you are essential builders of circular economy in part of our society.
But we can definitely not do it alone. You spoke also about ownership and other models of distribution. How is this important for architecture?
Yeah, of course, it's everything is connected. So if you don't holistically approach to those things, and one thing where I would absolutely like to draw your attention to, in too many cases, the policy approaches, including in European Commission and including in European Green Deal, they are too much focused. For example, in the case of the build sector, they are focused on the house, on the building itself. Instead, they would be focused on the overall spatial planning, knots organization, connectivity there, how to organize the things that you can reach the things quicker, faster, in different way. And then, of course, there is also the building, which needs to be built in a way that's environmentally friendly, ecological, and so on, that the materials which are used are, again, recyclable, and so on. So you need to look in that, and you need, of course, the preconditions, and ownership, it's part of the problem. So if you would have, I'm just now thinking loudly, if you would have for example, systems that all those things would not be actually privately owned, but would be owned by somebody who would be a developer, owner, builder, and so on, who would then take the responsibility that they are maintained, that they are recycled, or that they are changed for other use or whatever. I think, then you lose part of the problem in which we are currently living. So I'm not saying that this will happen immediately, but the whole development in the mobility sector goes pretty much in this direction now. So it goes to that because we have all understood that the major problem is actually not shifting from the combustion engine car to electric car 1-to-1. No, that's not the problem is that the typical European car is only 2% used. So 98% it's actually not efficiently used. So you have to address the problem where the problem lies. And by the way, in the recent report which we have done with the IRP, and which was looking to the consequences of the link to the build sector, also through the circular economy logic, one of the policy measures which is basically the most effective measure, it's also that in particular in high developed countries you limit the space per person which you use in the cities, because if you don't do that, of course you have the problem. That doesn't mean that again you want to lower the standard of living, but there are certain limits. We talk about efficiency, but we should talk also about sufficiency, and it's pretty obvious that these are not the questions which one can easily just say no, this is we have to leave the freedom of consumption to the consumer and so on, because all the decisions have certain consequences which we all together then are simply having on our shoulders.
And to conclude, what would you say is the most important if we want to live well but within ecological limits?
Yeah, I think the most important is simply recognizing one fact. That is that we are the first generation ever living on the planet, which is living in socio-ecological space of planetary scope. So we are so interconnected and interdependent that we need to understand that if we do not respect each other, if we do not behave with more responsibility, collectively and individually, we will have serious problems. And I think that's basically connecting to the question with which you started. We see the population grow, we see the economic developments and so on. Yeah, that's the fact of life. So we are, for the first time, the planet, it's becoming our house, which feels endangered, which we, with our activity collectively, are putting in a shape which is not anymore providing us a safe future. And the safe future is everything what matters.
Thank you, Janez, for being a part of Future Architecture Rooms.
Thank you.